This episode is sponsored by the Bridge to Recovery, a nonprofit program on 115 acres near Bowling Green, Kentucky, a tranquil place where they've been changing lives for over 40 years. Their people improve their quality of life by acknowledging past emotional wounds and healing from all forms of trauma. The CEO, Paul Hamlin, has been a friend of mine for 20 years. Call him directly at 858-945-7848. That's 858-945-7848, or you can learn more about the Bridge to Recovery by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting thebridgetorecovery.com. Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
Hi, I'm Dr. Donna Marks, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
Thanks for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. This episode features Dr. Donna Marks, and we talk about her new book, which I think is really important. It's called Exit the Maze: One Addiction, One Cause, One Cure. So Donna was on the show a while back in episode 16, and during this episode, I kind of jumped back to some of the dialogue from episode 16, just to give you a little background on her expertise and what brought her to this place where she wrote this book. And I also do that because, full transparency here, when we recorded this interview, I don't know what happened, but some of it just sounded like garbage, like 30 minutes of it. So I needed to edit it out, and just simply doing that just didn't seem good enough to fully portray what great work Donna does. So we jump around a little bit and start with the new interview, go back to some clips from the earlier interview, and then circle back to the new one at the end. And so I think it turned out okay. I hope you enjoy it. It's good stuff. Dr. Donna Marks on Exit the Maze. Donna, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I've been excited about having you on to talk about your new book. So why don't you tell us about that?
Okay, thank you for having me on the show, Tom. The name of the book is Exit the Maze: One Addiction, One Cause, and One Cure. And it just came out on Amazon this week.
Yeah, I got a copy of it. And, you know, this is something you and I have talked about a little bit. And
yes,
both of us working in the addiction treatment industry, you know, this idea of one addiction, one cause, one cure is something kind of new, or something that's, it's an attention getter. It's different than what we usually hear in our circles.
Yes.
So where did this idea come from? And
well, it came from a lifetime of living with addiction and working with addictions. So to give you the condensed version, I was born into addiction. I've struggled with addiction my whole life. I became a therapist, and I said, I don't want to deal with addiction. And sure enough, you know, all of my referrals tended to be from addiction-related centers or issues. And then I wound up being part owner of an outpatient treatment program. So there was a different purpose for my life than I had thought. And then when I got into my own recovery, I also struggled, I began to notice, and working with others, and even in my own process, which I spent so many years in therapy and workshops and spirituality programs and everything that I could read or everything that I could experience, years and years and years and years. And after many years, I still did not feel well. And I also noticed that a lot of other therapists seemed to be really wanting to help other people, but they were unhealed healers themselves, and they often were in recovery. So I finally realized that what was happening for me and many of the people I was working with is that they were perhaps getting sober, or, going to an eating disorder clinic, or going to Gamblers Anonymous or Nicotine Anonymous, or whatever the case may be. And then they just simply transferred to another addiction. And I was doing that. And that's why I wasn't getting better. So that's how the book came about, is really saying to myself, what is going on here? It took a relapse after 23 years, relapse with alcohol, for me to really go much, much deeper in my soul search and my rigorous honesty approach to understand that I had simply bounced around from one addiction to the next. Mm-hmm. And so then I began to realize that the addiction isn't alcohol, drugs, sex, relationships, love, nicotine, gambling, excitement, running. The addiction is this invisible hole, this emptiness inside of each one of us that has an addiction. And that hole is going to have a funnel coming out of it that's trying to plug into anything possible. And so that's why I say there's one addiction. And until we start treating addiction in that manner, people will not actually get well, in my opinion.
The Path to Authenticity is powered by Equivox. For digital marketing and web design services, visit equivox.com.
But there was something inside of me that kept saying, you can do better. You can do better than this. You don't have to do this. So I did. I made a lot of mistakes in my life, but it's been a lifelong search of trying to do better and healing. And when I first started my own healing work, and when I was about 30, when I first went into recovery, well, I'd been in a lot of therapy before that, by the way, and they never touched on addiction in the family or personal addiction. They just didn't know, I guess. So when I went into my own personal recovery, I really started recognizing, that I had a lot of work to do. And first I went into Gestalt therapy, did a lot of healing there, got certified in Gestalt therapy, did hypnotherapy, got certified in that, got my addictions training. It was like one thing after the next. I recognized I need more. I need more. So, and I was also working with other people. So I could see where we were all stuck,
Right.
And, so I just kept pushing on through and did a personal training in psychoanalysis, which is very intense. And, and that I did that for 13 years, which was like a minimum of twice a week and sometimes 4 times a week.
You mean your own therapy?
My own personal analysis. Plus I got certified in psychoanalysis, which is also you go back to school for, in my case, it was 4 years plus 4 years of supervision doing psychoanalysis with patients. So, and even all of that, I was still stuck.
So there's a big difference between psychotherapy and psychoanalysis. Right. So can you explain that?
Yes. Well, psychoanalysis is psychotherapy, but psychotherapy isn't psychoanalysis.
Right.
So psychoanalysis, I mean, it's not so easily explained, except that it was started by Freud, and then a lot of other people formulated off of his theories and to put their own take on it. I have yet to read any type of therapy currently that hasn't taken from Freud. They don't even know they're doing it in most cases, but he actually learned how to tap into the unconscious. And the most valuable part of psychoanalysis is that the analyst is trained to understand that everything that's going on with the patient is through transference, what happened to that patient, how they experience relationships. And then the analyst is ideally able to stay neutral, even when they're reacting. They use their reactants to analyze what happened to the person.
Right.
They recognize that they can help to heal the relationship. It's very similar to the Course in Miracles, that all the past comes up in the analytic, in the analysis, but the analyst helps the person. No, I'm not your mother. I'm not your father. This is now. We can work through this now. Now, a lot of times patients don't want to do it, but usually if they commit to psychoanalysis, they will hang in there in that process and they will do it. Not everybody's a candidate for psychoanalysis, though. They have to be able and willing to tolerate all of that, which is very, very, very uncomfortable. But it's good for the relationship part of a therapy, but it doesn't necessarily heal the wound. A person can stay in psychoanalysis for a long time and still have an active addiction. A person can stay in psychoanalysis for a long time and never mourn.
So you really have come to a place where you've used all of these different bits and pieces to create
the book.
The book. So how long were you in recovery before you started to go deeper into that next layer of healing?
Well, I was 23 years into recovery and then I relapsed. And that was a very conscious thing. It wasn't impulsive. And while I was doing that, there was a certain amount of I don't want to put this in a positive text because it's not the way to do it, but it's what I did. And there was a certain amount of, I had always been a compliant do-gooder kind of, trying to always be perfect. And if I was perfect growing up, then maybe I could minimize some of the abuse. And actually it did help, especially as, if I could take control and, clean the house and minimize the stress and all that. So for the first time, I wasn't being a good girl anymore. I was like rebelling. So it wasn't the way to do it, but it did bring me to a more authentic level of myself. And at that point, I dug deep. I dug really deep and I started allowing myself to really, really feel. And, I wasn't in therapy at the time. I'd finished every kind of therapy all over the world, spirituality and everything. I said, this is just not working. Something's wrong with me. It's just never going to work. And I might as well just do whatever I want. But it had been working and that was part of it working. And then when I went back into recovery, it was with a whole different mentality and really allowing myself to go, like I said earlier, into the emotional component and recognizing, there's nothing wrong with the steps. And by the way, I've gone to all the ACA stuff for all of that too. It's just that, it gets confusing. And so one of the points I really want to help people understand is if you're stuck, it's just something's not set loose yet inside of you. There's a pain, there's a wound, there's something that's still not addressed yet. And it's a matter of choosing to love yourself enough to allow that pain to come out. So many people say, I've been sober too long and I should be well. And they do a number on themselves like I did. And rather than I'm not well and it's okay. It's okay. I got to figure this out and I will figure it out. And I'm not going to give up. Never. That's my motto. Never, never, never give up. Never, never, never.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that was reassuring to me at one point, was someone telling me that, Bill Wilson and this guy and that guy, a lot of people in long-term recovery reach a point where, there's some, there's a transition they go through where it's a whole deeper level of change and, that happened with me too, going through a divorce and recovery.
Yes.
Learning what codependency really is instead of just, using it as a label, which I think gets done a lot in our little world.
Yes.
But really understanding that there are symptoms and you know, a lot of it, what it was about for me was not being able to adequately experience or express my wants and needs.
Yes. Yes, because you had disassociated from those early on,
Right.
like most codependents. So we get that, like any other addiction, artificially.
I think a lot of times we want to just think if the addiction to the substance isn't there,
Right.
that everything's okay.
Right.
And that's really
Sometimes people get addicted to everything having to be okay,
right.
and that's dysfunctional.
Or not okay.
Right. Some people get addicted to pain. I talk
Right.
about that in the book. That's, I think, one of the biggest addictions of all, because someone who feels dead inside, you know, when they feel that aliveness of the pain, even though it's
Right.
overwhelming, at least, you know, it compels them to keep going back for more.
Right.
And this is particularly true in relationships or any type of deadness, you know, that addiction is covering up.
Hey, folks, you can find The Path to Authenticity on Patreon, patreon.com. Patrons are entitled to supplemental content like early access to episodes as well as unedited interviews. There are other benefits you can find in the various tiers. Any contribution is greatly appreciated. Visit patreon.com/The Path to Authenticity.
Okay, so when you go to the grocery store, do you like everything in the grocery store? Do you like anchovies? Oh, I hate anchovies. Do you like radishes? No. I said, well, do you still go to the grocery store? Well, of course. And I'm like, well,
Right.
do you go to the grocery store and you sit there and stare at the anchovies and the radishes and say, I really don't like it here. It's making me so anxious. I can't stand it. Or do you just go get what you need? You put it in the cart. Or what about the checkout clerk? Maybe there's one that you really got into it with and you don't like her. So
Right.
do you sit there and stare at her and go, I don't like you. I don't like you. I can't go through the checkout line because I don't like you. I don't like you. I'm not going here anymore. You know, you just go to a different checkout line, or you make peace with that clerk and you get your groceries and you go home and you nourish yourself with the food that you bought. And it's the same thing with the program. You know, we need to understand our minds will zoom in and focus on what we do not like, rather than the beauty of whatever, you know, whether it's church or these other recovery programs or AA, the beauty that people are getting helped and healed.
Right.
And you can too. That's what we need to focus on.
Right.
And if there isn't a right meeting for you, then, you know, don't focus on the radishes and the sardines and the anchovies. Just move on to a different place, a different aisle in the same grocery store. So if you're in 12 steps, if you don't like one particular meeting, then go to a different one until you find your niche.
Yeah, the last interview I did for the show was with a guy named Joshua Shea, who is a recovering pornography addict and has been in recovery for a number of years. But he lives in rural Maine. Not a ton of AA meetings there. Not a ton of, I mean, he suffers from chemical dependency too. Well, again, I mean, but in we throw your lens over it. He has one addiction. But anyway, he went to treatment at two different places to deal with the two different things. But my point is, he lives in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there are one or two meetings a week, I think he said, that are within an hour's drive of him. And, you know, if you go to those and you don't see anybody who you can connect with, then that's pretty tough, you know, and AA, NA, the various 12-step fellowships are different wherever you go. It's not the same. You know, where we live in Palm Beach County, we have a wealth of meetings. So if you can't find one where you feel like you fit, you're probably not looking. But it's much different for a guy like him who lives in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And what he did, one of the things he did was take the mantle of advocacy, because, you know, there aren't a lot of people out there talking about pornography addiction. There's so much shame around it. And so
it's so prevalent.
It is. So he decided this is how I'm going to pursue, or one of the ways I'm going to pursue and maintain my own recovery. And it leads him to people all the time who need help.
Mm-hmm.
Either, the people who are engaging in the behavior themselves or their spouses a lot of times. But my point is he found a way to make it work.
This is what I'm talking about. This man has learned how to love himself.
Right.
He is determined to give himself what he needs and then share that with others.
Yeah. Wow.
That is an act of self-love. That I am worth it. I'm going to figure it out. I'm not going to sit back like in recovery as an addict and say, do me, world. I'm going to be the searcher. I'm going to find the answers. I'm going to love myself enough to keep at this with all the imperfections, with all the flaws, with all the mistakes. And I'm going to use all those experiences to help others. That is self-love. And that's beautiful. And if each of us could approach addiction from that place, there's not a right way. There's not a wrong way. You don't get graded. You're not a failure if you don't get it 100 on the first attempt. If you get a 50 on the first attempt, that's better than 0. Then you might get a 60 next time, and you might go back down to 55, and you might get an 80. It's a process of learning and growing. And the more that you take what you learn and help other people, the more you're sharing and receiving the love. The more you're connecting.
Yeah.
The more your life has meaning. And that's how the founders of AA stayed sober.
Yeah.
They didn't just have their little meeting in Akron, Ohio, or in Bill and Lois's apartment. They took it out and helped others.
That's a really good point. They did what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And at the time, there was so much shame. Oh my God.
Mm. Well, and there still is.
Right.
And one of the things.
Yes, there still is. And it's very sad because like it was the town drunk or the town addict or the gambling freak or the sex, freak or whatever. And, of course, those were the extreme cases. Everyone else was in the closet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are the ones that people knew about.
Right. Those are the ones that were too sick to hide it anymore.
And
then that was the comparison. I'm not like that, so I don't have a problem.
Right. Which is, the opposite of what we need,
Yes.
That separation from each other.
Right.
But
exactly.
The other thing I like a lot about this is, and at one point in my career, I made a decision. And I think I was already there unconsciously, but I made a decision to be intentional about this. It was, I'm someone who believes in people, and that's who I am, and that's who I will be. So, when it comes to how I treat people, I'm gonna, at the end of the day, not that you let people trample over you, but I specifically as it applies to addiction and recovery, I believe in people, and when I see someone who's struggling, I tell them, you can do this. I know you can do this.
Yeah.
And to me, how it applies to your book and what we're talking about is also believing that they inherently have the answers. And if they follow that, it doesn't have to be the way everybody else says it has to be.
Right.
We each have our own path to find.
Yes. Yes.
And that's where it ties into the podcast.
Exactly. And if you don't know how to do something, it's probably a good idea to get some help on how to do it.
Right.
Because if I've been trying to do something on my own and it's not working, then I probably ought to get some help. But there's many sources of help. Yes. And you're telling people that they can do it. You're also practicing self-love because you're saying to Tom, you can do it. We can do it. And not only that, it's not that hard. The difficulty is the resistance. The difficulty is, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm willing to go through whatever that feels like.
Mm.
Because the
Yeah.
addiction will tell us this is hard,
Right.
But we all know that any of us in recovery, after the first couple weeks, we don't even hardly think about it anymore, especially if our life is full of new events and exciting activities and new friends and things like that. So that it's not hard. I mean, once you stop it, it's not hard. It's relatively easy, but the consciousness has to clip onto that rather than how hard it is.
Yeah. Well, this reminds me of a time sitting in your office when I'm talking about, I'm going through this process of feeling these feelings that I have been resisting for all these years. And I remember saying to you, oh my God, this is exhausting. And you looked at me and said, no, your resistance to it is what's exhausting. And
yeah.
It clicked that, oh my God, she's right.
Yeah.
This isn't really that hard. It's just that I've been fighting it for my entire life.
Right. So you've been going barefoot your whole life, and now you have to wear shoes because you have a job that requires you wear shoes. You get out of bed in the morning and you sit there and you don't know really how to put your shoes on. And somebody showed you how to do it, but you don't quite get it yet because the shoelaces are tripping you up every time. And so every morning you're getting up and you're staring at those shoes and go, oh my God, I got to do this again. I got to do this again. I got to do this again. You stare at the shoes, and every morning you're going out of your house barefoot, and somebody's saying, it's not that hard. You just got to practice at it a little bit. And I'm trying, I'm not getting it, and I've tried it 3 times now and I still can't get my shoes done. And the exhaustion around that type of approach rather than it's okay. I'm going to put the shoe on. I may not get it right, but I'm going to go out with my shoes. And then if they're not tied quite right, someone will help me with that. Someone will show me how to do it. It's okay. I don't have to get this perfect. The exhaustion comes from resisting all of that, to being vulnerable, to being open. And like you said, with your mission of helping us all to be authentic. It's okay if I show up outside with my shoelaces mistied. It's okay. Someone's going to help me with that. And we can laugh about it. We can laugh about it.
Yeah,
we don't have to get into the drama of, oh my God, I don't know how to tie my shoes. Yeah. I'm 30, 40, 50, 60 years old.
So what do you think? Are we also addicted to the resistance?
Well, I don't think that's an addiction to resistance. I think that's an addiction to pain. And pain fills that hole with something rather than the void, rather than the emptiness. It's better to float in the pain than the abyss of who am I, where am I, what's happening, what's going on, what meaning is there, who loves anybody, I'm so alone.
Yeah, that's because the pain's a distraction too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It certainly is.
And a lot of times it's we know what to expect with the pain. We know what we're getting with the pain.
Right.
But we don't know what we're getting with the feelings if we've never felt them.
Right. And that's where the most important part of learning to love yourself is choosing love instead of fear. Because the resistance is fear to facing whatever is in that invisible hole that's driving us to the addiction. So if we say, I don't really want to be afraid of those radishes anymore. They're not hurting me. I'm just going to walk on by them. And I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to face whatever comes up. I'm going to go into this invisible hole within me, this wound, and I'm going to face whatever comes up. I'm just going to let it have its way with me. I'm going to sit with it. I'm not going to run from it. I'm going to go all in. I'm going to commit 100% to loving myself. That creates huge growth and movement and freedom. That creates a consciousness like, no, I don't think I want to do that anymore. It's not worth it. That creates the self-love that gives the peace that we're really trying to get through these other faults and substitutes for soothing and comfort that only create more dissension and more separation from our self-love.
So obviously this work, I mean, it's not something you could have done until, you went through what you have gone through, and including many years of experience in your career. So if there's a time that you could go back and tell that person something, what would it be? At what point? And what would it?
I would have handed myself the book I just wrote. So you can save yourself a lot of grief by jumping in 100%. I would say, seriously, I would say, Donna, first of all, I'd say it's not your fault that things have happened to you that caused a lot of pain. And it's going to take a while for that pain to get resolved. And I'm here to help you. I will comfort you. I will guide you. And when I can't do that, I'll take you someplace, or different places where we can get that kind of help. And you don't need to do this to yourself anymore. You don't need to judge yourself. You don't need to feel guilty. You don't need to feel ashamed. And you don't have to drink. And you don't have to look for a relationship to fix you. You don't have to smoke. You don't have to do any of these things anymore. You don't have to work so much. You don't have to run marathons. You don't have to prove yourself to anybody. Like, I'm here to help you. We're just going to let life come to us. Yes, we have some ambitions, and I know you have dreams, and I'm going to help you with those dreams. But it doesn't have to be perfect. I love you. I'm here for you, and we'll do this together. That's what I would say to her when she was about 5 years old and she wanted to die. That's what I would say to her.
Wow. Well, when you said it's not your fault part in the very beginning, I mean, that went straight to my heart, and it almost always does. And I've learned that's a big one for people that, and it comes up in a movie, Good Will Hunting, where Robin Williams.
That was so good.
Yeah. But he repeatedly says it to him because, a lot of times as listeners to a message, like, we're so quick to dismiss it. Oh yeah, I know it's not my fault.
Yes.
But that scenario in that movie is so real because, so many of us need to hear that, and we need to have it repeated to us.
Right.
And when that happens, the tears fall, and they need to fall.
Yes. Yes. I was actually 5 years old and that happened. Something really traumatic happened, and I was abused. And I said, I can remember I was in the hallway of the house, and I had my little pajamas on, a little curly-headed 5-year-old girl, and I said, what did I do wrong? What, it wasn't just like in this instance, like, what did I do wrong by being born? I don't want to be here. And this voice, my first conscious contact with a higher power, said, it's not your fault. He's sick. It's not your fault. And that voice really has carried me throughout my life. I have disconnected from it at times because my addiction substituted for that self-love and that voice. But I think that we all have that voice within us, and we can find it and get the soothing and the direction and the truth that we need to go forward.
Well, Donna, I mean, I love doing this with you. It's been so great. And, I want to say this, you've made such a difference in my life that, I can say with a fair amount of certainty that this podcast, at least right now, the way it is, it wouldn't exist without the love and support and direction that I've gotten from you over the last couple of years. And I really, really appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to share your wisdom with the listeners here. It's so important, this stuff. And just thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. And I feel that I've been simply a catalyst for the light in you that wants to shine. and has a huge purpose and a huge mission. And so I just feel like, if anything, that I was able to light the match to reignite your candle so that you can burn brightly. And this podcast is a voice of light. And I'm so happy for you that you're fulfilling your purpose here.
Well, thank you, Donna. I'll talk to you soon.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thanks for listening to The Path to Authenticity. If you'd like to learn more about our guest, you can find links in the show notes or visit our website at thepathtooauthenticity.com. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, if you have a suggestion for a topic, or you know someone who would make a great guest, email the show at thepathtooauthenticity@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you know someone else who would enjoy the show, or even just a particular episode, please share it with them. Every little bit helps. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider becoming one wherever it is you choose to listen. You can find the show on Patreon, where by becoming a patron, you can hear episodes before they're released publicly. You can gain access to supplemental content. There are other benefits in the various tiers. Visit patreon.com/thepathtooauthenticity. Join our Facebook community or follow the show on Instagram, both at The Path to Authenticity. We also have a YouTube channel. You can connect with us on Twitter or Pinterest. You can find the Path to Authenticity playlist on Spotify. Obviously, there are a lot of ways you could be spending your time, so I appreciate you spending some of it here with me. I'm Tom Gentry. Thanks for listening. Be nice.
You did great, honey.